Welcome back to Cancer Buzz TV. I'm your host, Summer Johnson. On this show, we aim to bring you the news and the latest issues in cancer care you need to know. Today, a new project from ACCC exploring disparities in access to biomarker testing and targeted therapies for non-small cell lung cancer. The good news is the identification of actionable biomarkers in many cancers is fueling huge advancements in precision oncology and targeted therapies. But many patients, particularly those from underserved communities, don't have access to the tests and associated therapies. Recent studies report that more than 70% of patients treated in the community do not receive biomarker testing as recommended by NCCN guidelines. Last fall, ACCC, in partnership with LUNGevity, launched clinician and provider-facing studies to understand the specific barriers to access to precision medicine in NSCLC among those underserved patient communities as part of its Eliminating Precision Medicine Disparities project. They were able to identify the resources and practice patterns needed to help this patient population get access to the testing and therapies for actionable biomarkers. Here today to tell us about the project is Dr. Christopher Lathan, the Chief Clinical Access and Equity Officer at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He's also an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and on ACCC's advisory committee for the Eliminating Precision Medicine Disparities project. And Nikki Martin, the Director of Precision Medicine Initiatives at LUNGevity Foundation. Thank you both for joining us here today. Let's get right to it. Dr. Lathan, let's start with you. Why are you so passionate about disparities when it comes to access to biomarker testing for NSCLC?
Summer, I think for me, right, my whole career started looking at who gets access to treatment by race and class. And when you look at lung cancer, and I've been doing lung cancer as a medical oncologist for 20 years, and we didn't have a lot of tools in the beginning. But now we have a lot more tools. So to me, this is a continuation of a question I've asked from the very beginning, that your zip code and your skin color and how much money you have in your insurance shouldn't determine the type of care that you get. And now we're in this new molecular era. It's important to make sure those same testing mechanisms are available to everyone. So this is truly a passion for me.
Nikki, tell us about your perspective from LUNGevity.
Sure. Lung cancer patients are already faced with stigma when they're diagnosed with this disease. It's one of the only cancers that really carries this additional burden of the stigma because of the relationship with smoking, perceived relationship with smoking. And so for me personally, that's always been an issue that I've wanted to try and combat. And meanwhile, lung cancer is making the most progress in terms of research, lung cancer researchers, pharmaceutical companies, diagnostic assays. They're all really paving a terrific pathway for better outcomes for lung cancer patients. And so it just seems like there's this strange dichotomy where patients are faced with the stigma, and that might end up being a barrier for them asking and seeking out the best quality care, which would obviously need to include comprehensive biomarker testing. So I want to try and address that through my work, and so does LUNGevity want to address that through our organizational focus.
Dr. Lathan, from your position, what were your top takeaways from the ACCC LUNGevity survey?
I mean, there were a few things, right? The number one thing was that who was getting tested. There was a statistically significant difference with race when you looked at who was getting next generation sequencing, and I think that's important. There are some other things there that we can take some. There's some good clues in there, and that on the first line therapy, when people are getting who's getting appropriately treated, that seemed to not have a statistically significant difference. But who's getting this, comprehensive guideline approved next generation sequencing and biomarker testing, the full panel, there was a difference. And we know that difference also leads to who's getting in clinical trials as well. So, I think that to me, one of the big takeaways here was that it was a 10 percentage difference, right? It's not non-significant. And I think that's what I really walked away with. What we were thinking was happening was indeed happening and we could see it and now we can document it.
Nikki, what stood out to you from the surveys?
Yeah, I mean, everything Dr. Lathan said, their lower income patients reported getting tested at a much lower rate than higher income patients. And, about 50% of the lower income patients, lower socioeconomic status, and that included more diverse racial background, 50% were reporting knowing that they got testing. Then there's this additional layer of that we need to address, that only about a quarter of those who were tested didn't know their results. So that means that they're not having the right kind of conversations with their provider. They're not maybe receiving the right kind of content to take home, to focus on. There's a gap there in communication and in the materials that they're being provided that's health literate. So these are issues that I think we can collectively address, but it does raise concerns for those people that are being treated right now. And we want to make sure that lower income patients are receiving the same standard of care and communication that higher income patients are receiving.
Dr. Lathan, you serve on the advisory committee for the project. The clinician-facing survey found a significant gap between clinicians in the community setting and the academic setting. How do you think that the ACCC project findings and the resulting work will address this to move the needle?
Well, I'm lucky enough that I work in an academic environment, but I also work in a community environment. I have a practice that's in one of our network sites, and I have a practice that's in, the main cancer center site. And I would say that, the what we saw from the study, and some of this was presented at ASCO, told us what we saw on the ground. The infrastructure is different for these community docs, and many of them don't have the same ability to engage the patients the same way as far as time. They don't have the same access to help in ordering the tests. So what it hopefully will let us do is advocate for infrastructure and push education, both for patients and providers, but also push the infrastructure forward. I think that's really important for us. And so I think that the finding of the data can really help us, link the anecdotal stories we've seen and really try to emphasize where we're going to put our interventions to make greater access for patients.
Nikki, what is LUNGevity advocating for as a result of these survey findings?
Two things. We really believe that it's important that the right conversations take place between providers and patients. And as part of this ongoing work with ACCC, I'm really excited about, the opportunity to try and create standards around these types of patient-friendly, plain language descriptions of testing and why it's important to wait for your results and what the results will mean for your treatment selection. And then the second thing is encouraging and advocating for more patients to become familiar with and be connected to financial navigators, because we saw that the lower income patients did have a concern around the cost of testing, and that does come into their minds when they think about whether they want to have the testing done or not. Yet only about 27% of those reported being connected to a financial navigator. And the vast majority of all patients in the survey didn't know about resources that might be available to help pay for the cost of testing. So again, these are issues that I think we can collectively solve. That's what I think is exciting about the research, but there needs to be an effort put towards this.
Dr. Lathan, so of course the COVID-19 pandemic brought health disparities into the spotlight. That's something that you've been working on for a long time, but it was finally highlighted by the mainstream media. And then on top of that, of course, because of the pandemic, there's concern with oncology care providers about delayed screenings and diagnoses. Through that lens, explain to us why the current environment makes it even more critical for us to improve access to biomarker tests.
Yeah, I think there's two things, right? One is it's true that COVID unearthed, longstanding structural inequities in our system by class, race, language. And then on top of that, it brought us into a conversation about social justice and and that really impacts medicine. How that people deserve the same care. They deserve the same care when they have the disease. And so I think when you add into the fact that COVID has shown us that all of our screening that we're doing is all backed up. Patients were afraid to come in. They were told not to come in at first. And now you're going to have we hypothesize there's going to be a higher percentage of people who are going to have later stage lung cancer. So if you add all these things together, you're going to have more people coming in with lung cancer, more people who need to have biomarker testing. And don't forget that this is an area that is exploding. Just this year, 2 more FDA-approved drugs based on molecular sequencing, are available. So we need more than ever to eliminate the inequity involved in our treatment. Because here we come. This inequity that we've unearthed from COVID is visible to everyone, and we're going to have more cases. So now more than ever, while the spotlight is on inequity, we really need to devise a plan to educate folks and to make sure that everybody has equal access to appropriate guideline care.
Nikki, what's the next step to level the playing field?
So based on the key learnings that we had from the physician research and the patient research, we are in the process right now of developing what we're referring to as an intervention that will be approved by patients and providers for use in several ACCC sites. So we'll be piloting this out, and it's literally it's a care plan. And so it walks the providers and the patients through this process of ensuring that the diagnosis and the biomarker testing and the conversations around the biomarker testing occur at the right times, that providers are equipped with knowing what are all of those steps that are guideline concordant, but also making sure patients see what is their full length of their care plan look like. At what point are they waiting for testing results? At what point are they coming in for other types of provider interactions, like with a primary care provider, making sure that their vaccines are up to date? So it really prompts a lot of steps in the care plan process, and it gives patients an eye into the long-term care plan, which gives them confidence in their provider, but it also gives them confidence that they have a tool that they can talk to their providers about their care. And it gives the provider something that they can kind of track against and literally like check off and make sure in conversations with their multidisciplinary team, with the pathologist or the other members of the multidisciplinary team, this is where we are in this patient's care plan.
Dr. Lathan, what's the takeaway here? What do you want to leave for academic providers and for community providers?
Yeah, Summer, I think we need to think about infrastructure, which is not something it's a word that we're hearing a lot, but we don't think about it in our healthcare. We need to have an operational system that allows people to get the care that is appropriate and recommended. And I think when we're thinking about the diagnosis of cancer, specifically lung cancer, as you heard Nikki say earlier, this is a cancer that has a lot of stigma. And there are great advances that are being made. So the take-home point here is lung cancer has a lot of opportunities for treatment that impact patients' quality of life, even in the metastatic setting. Okay. And if we don't get the appropriate treatment to the appropriate patients, all of these great improvements that we're making continue to worsen disparities in equity. And I think the take home should be, we found that there's a difference, and now we pivot to action to fix it. And this has to be multi-level. And so I think, yes, it's sad to see that we have this difference, but more importantly, now we've seen it, we've quantified it, we can now pivot to fix it and make sure that folks have the treatment that they deserve.
Thank you, Dr. Lathan, and thank you, Nikki Martin. You can find more resources related to today's discussion, including the survey and ACCC's Eliminating Precision Medicine Disparities Project, through the link in the show notes. Next time on this channel, a deep dive into a quality initiative to improve care for patients with advanced stage NSCLC. Until then, on behalf of all of us here at Cancer Buzz TV, thank you for watching. I'm Summer Johnson.